Thank you. Thank you again for the welcome that I've had this morning. It's lovely to be back in Crindau. I'm a bit thrown, to be honest with you. I've brought the board. I work with OEC Ministries with Pete Hodge and Steve Harris. And quite often I'll take this board to churches like this, and what I try to do is tie up the kids' talk with the theme of what I'm going to do for the main subject. So it's not just a load of random talk. The two things they're joined up, and quite often what I get told by the adults is, oh, do you know what? We've only got a couple of kids, but we really love the painting anyway. So I'm hoping that is the case this morning, especially as one of your little ones has already told me he knows exactly what's on you. He's seen it, you're inside out. So I don't know if you've had this in the last 6 months. And I'm thinking, oh. But as our brother reminded us, God is in control. So we got to it. I mean, do the kids want to come towards the front, mums and dads? Do you want to, so they can see it a bit better? Mum and dads come with them if they really don't want to, or they don't feel fine. But it's just easy to do the kids engineered talk when you got the kids down the front, to be honest with you. What I'm going to do is just do this story that takes a little while, but it is actually about one of my favourite people in the Bible. When I sat here just reflecting, and I actually became a Christian, as far as my memory serves, it was 10 years ago this weekend. Right? So I've had a week and a half to put it bluntly, or not so bluntly, but and it's kind of bypassed me. But I think a couple of days ago, from my reckoning, was 10 years ago that I became a Christian. And shortly after I became a Christian, in the Christian fellowship where I work in Welsh government, after I joined the fellowship and after a little while, they did like an interview thing, basically give you testimony in the form of like a chat show thing. And one of the questions I got asked was, who's your favourite person, or as I hate the term, character? I don't believe these are characters in the Bible. People have characteristics, but characters to me, certainly as an actor, are things of fiction. This is God's word. It's a real account. But who's your favorite personality in the Bible? And when I said this person, I got, well, really? Of all the people in the Bible? And yeah, really, and it will come to why towards the end of it. And you might be surprised, because I'm going to write this person's name up here. It's a woman, and that's not the thing that's surprising about it. But this is a name that we don't often. Can you all see? It's a good angle, okay? We don't often hear anymore. In fact, as far as I'm aware, this is a one-off. And as we go through the story, we might get an idea of why people generally don't, and I'm saying this being presumptuous, call their daughter. Can you see that? Can you? Rahab. Yeah. Can I just check, ladies? Is there anybody here called Rahab? Do we know anyone called Rahab? No, I thought not. I thought it was on reasonably safe grounds with that much at least. But this woman Rahab, we're going to paint her up here towards the bottom. We're going to paint her up, and we're going to paint her. The Bible doesn't tell us what she wore, but we're going to paint her up in a red dress. Okay? We're going to paint her up in a red dress, and I'm going to draw her with her hands on her hips. Okay? Because for various social reasons, we might assume that Rahab would walk around the streets of the town where she lived in her red dress and say things like, yeah, well, so what? Because people might say to her, Rahab, that was a really horrible thing you said to that person there. And she'd go, yeah, well, so what? They might say, Rahab, that was an awful thing you did. And Rahab would say, yeah, well, so what? Because Rahab gave the impression that she really didn't care what people thought about her. Okay? And she seemed to have a lot of what we might call baggage these days. But actually, a little bit about Rahab, she grew up, we presume, with her mum and dad or whatever. But as like a lot of people do when they grow up, and I'm sure maybe sometimes your mums and dads are looking forward to that day, you go off and you get your own place to live and they can breathe. But actually, she went and she got a house, and her house was built into the walls of the city where she lived. Now that sounds really weird, because when we think of walls, we think of them being like this thick. We don't think of a wall being so thick you could have a house in it. But actually, this city that she lived in, a city called Jericho, Actually, the walls were massive. What they'd done is they built a huge wall all the way around the city to defend it and to protect it. And it was so thick that not only did they have houses in it, but apparently it was so thick and so wide that around the top they used to have chariot races. Wow, imagine that. But the people there, they wanted to defend it even more than that. So what they did, as well as having this great big wall, on the top of it, they would put great big guards, great big soldiers with their spears and things, and they would look over and they would look out, and if anybody was going to attack, they'd be well ready for them. Not only that, but to make themselves even safer, they put this massive gate, this great big gate, right in the front of the city walls, so that nobody could get in who wasn't supposed to get in. That's how much they wanted to protect where they lived. But the Bible tells us that actually, although this might sound good, the people in Jericho, they weren't good. They were really bad. They used to do things that, I wouldn't even tell your mums and dads about. Okay? And the Bible tells us that the reason that they were bad, that they were doing wrong things, was because they stopped listening to someone. They stopped listening to somebody really important. I'm going to write his name up here. Okay? And hopefully, I think some of you have seen this before. Somebody's told me already that they have. But can you see what that says, kids? If you can read it? It might be my handwriting, block letters. No, bit difficult. Okay. It should say, or it does say, I hope, God. They'd stopped listening to God. Well, to come back to Rahab, okay? Now, I did tell you, I'm not going to tell you what the people in Jericho did particularly, but I will tell you about some of the things that Rahab used to do. You see, Rahab used to tell lots of these. If I can get down here. Can you see that? This is why I wanted the kids at the front. Can you see that word there? Can anybody see if you can see it, folks, adults as well, give them a hand. Lies. They used to tell lies. Now we know that we shouldn't tell lies, because lies are not good. But a lot of people today will say, you know what, it's only the big lies you need to worry about. If we tell little lies, little white lies some people still call them, actually that's not so bad. But the Bible tells us that actually, even if we tell little lies down here and we're able to get away with it with people we know, the Bible tells us that God sees everything. He sees all the amazing things we do, but also he sees all the really bad and the nasty things we do, including telling lies. And what the Bible tells us is that when we tell lies and we do other things that are wrong, it forms a barrier. We can't see it, it's invisible, but it forms a barrier between God up there and us down here. You see, God is perfect. God is what the Bible calls holy, which means there's nothing wrong with him at all. And so we can only have things where there's nothing wrong with them in his presence. And the fact that we cause that barrier, something the Bible calls sin, actually that divides us from God. And because of that, we can't have a friendship or a relationship with him. But, God didn't want to leave it like that, and God can do anything. And we'll come back to what he did do about it a bit later on. But anyway, to get back to Rahab. So Rahab was there. She was telling lies, but it wasn't just lies she was doing. She was also doing a lot of this. Can you see that one? Cheating. She was cheating. She wasn't just cheating at games. That would have been bad enough. Okay? But she was cheating on people. And actually, if we tell lies and we cheat on people, then people just don't want to trust us. They feel that they can't trust us. There's worse than that. She was actually doing this down here as well. She would steal. And when we live like that, and she wasn't just stealing things. She wasn't like just stealing your game cards or your Nintendo or whatever, or your purse or whatever you've got. She was actually stealing people's friends. So that made her the sort of person where people would say, you know what, you want to stay away from that Rahab because she's bad news. You want to stay from away from Rahab because she's trouble. She always does things that are wrong. You know what? She'll always do things that are wrong. But we know that actually that's not true. If we want to, we can change. And I said that Rahab lived in this city of Jericho. Well, the people in Jericho, despite the fact they had this great big wall, despite the fact they had the great big guards and the great big gate, they were really, really scared. They were really scared because, you see, just outside of our picture here, just along the other side of the river, there was a great big army set up. It was the army of God's people, the Israelites. And some years before, God had brought them out of Egypt. He'd had them wandering around in the desert for a long time. But now he was bringing them into the land that he'd promised them. And it was the land that this city, Jericho, was in. But you see, the problem was, there were lots of places that were really bad, just like Jericho. And what happened was, the people in Jericho had heard that the God of Israel had led them in battle. And they'd had some really great big victories. And so the people realized that they couldn't beat the God of the Israelite people. And they were really, really scared. Well, you know, I said about this woman Rahab, the Israelites were led by somebody who was really, really brilliant. He was a very brave man, and he was a very wise man. I'm going to write his name up here. You coming to help me? No, not quite. I'm going to write his name up, and then maybe, hopefully, you can see it. Okay, can you read that? Oh, you're having a go. It's Joshua. Is anybody here called Joshua or Josh? No, I thought it was on safer grounds at least. Oh, there is a Josh, but he's away, is it, or something? Ah, right, okay. Well, you know, this is where the name comes from. And I expect, as well as the fact that it sounds nice, I expect a lot of people, particularly Christian parents, when they've had a baby boy, they've looked at this man and thought he was such a great bloke that's who I'm going to name my son after. Because you see, Joshua led the people in battle. He led them very bravely, but he was very wise because he always went to God for advice. He always prayed to God to find out what to do. And occasionally, once or twice, he didn't, and it all went wrong. But then he learned the lesson, which shows that he was wise, because he was sensible enough to learn where things had gone wrong. Well, God said to Joshua, I've got a big job for you. I need you to destroy the city of Jericho. Because the people in there are so bad, and they're so terrible. They do awful things to each other. They're not listening to me. I've lost patience with them. They need to go. He said, I need you to invade the city and to destroy it. Well, Joshua looked at the wall, and he looked at the gates, and he looked at the guards. I thought, how am I going to do this? So he prayed to God, and God said, what you need to do is send 2 of your best spies in. Whoa, we'll draw them out down here. They were hiding out, as somebody pointed out to me earlier. They're hiding behind this bush. And he said, I need you to go. He said, why don't you send 2 spies in and find out what's happening in Jericho? So Joshua picked his best 2 spies, and he said, this is what you need to do. You need to go and find one of these. You need to go and find a way to get into Jericho. That's what you need to do. So how do you think now, if you were one of the spies, how do you think you would get into Jericho? Oh, now there's a little face smiling at me there. You'd use a bomb. Yeah, I think that they might have an idea you're coming, but that's a good. But I can see where you're coming from on that. Well, you know what? The Bible doesn't actually tell us how they got in. It doesn't tell us. All we know is that they did get in. But you know, once they got in, well, they found out that the people in Jericho were worse than they ever thought they were going to be. And they found out that the defenses were stronger than they thought they were going to be. And they were thinking, how on earth are we going to manage this? And then, because God's in control, as we reminded earlier, they bumped into someone. Who do you think they bumped into? They bumped into Rahab. Now, Rahab, for everything else she might have been, Rahab wasn't stupid. It's safe to say that Rahab knew a lot of the blokes in Jericho, and when she saw these 2 and she didn't recognize them, well, she realized, she twigged it out, that they were probably spies from the camp. So she took them back to her house, and she took them back, and the neighbors wouldn't have thought too much about anything unusual about that, but she took them back, and she said to them, are you spies from the Israelite camp? Now, because they were good Israelites and everything, they knew not to lie, so they went, yeah, we are. And she said, everybody is really scared. We've heard about how amazing things that the God that you worship and the God that you follow, we've heard about the amazing things he's done in battle with you. We realise that despite our big walls and our guards and our gates, we'll be no match for you. When you come and invade us, you're going to destroy us. We know this. Everybody's really, really scared. Now, at this point, she might have said to them, I realise that your God is real and he's powerful, so I'm not a very nice person. If I say sorry to him for all the things I've done, do you think he'll forgive me? And if she'd have said that, the spies would have gone, yes, Rahab, of course he will. Because, you see, God doesn't want to punish people. He wants them to forgive, wants to be able to forgive them, but he's got to do what's fair and what's right. So, if that had been said to her, it probably would have been the best news she'd ever heard. But at that moment, there's a knock on the door. Thought Rahab, it's probably the guards. Right, go upstairs. And she took them upstairs and she hid them. And she went and she opened the door. And the guards said, Rahab, have you seen any of Joshua's spies? And she went, oh, yes, I came home, they were here a minute ago, but I got rid of them. And if you hurry now, you might catch up with them before they cross back over the river to their camp. So the guards turned round, and off they ran after them with their spears and their shields and everything else. Well, when it was safe, Rahab brought them out, and she said, look, she said, I've helped you, because I realised that your God is mighty. She said, I realised that. She said, I need something. She said, this is what I need. She said, I need this. Can you see that? You can't understand it. I'm really on a hide into nothing this morning with you, aren't I? Yeah. Right. It says escape. Okay? So, she said, I need a way of escape. She said, I need to find a way of escape. And the spies said to her, look, they said, absolutely, they said, when we come to invade, we will spare you because you've shown mercy to us, and by doing that, you've acknowledged God. You've acknowledged how great God is. So actually, what you need to do is this. When we come and invade, you need to hang a piece of red rope outside your window and on your door. And if you do that, then when we come to invade, when we see the red rope, we'll know it's your house, and we'll leave your house be. That's what we'll do. Right, thank you, she said. And then she said, right, now I need to help you to get back to your camp. So what she did that night was she hung a rope outside her room, not because of the invasion, but so that the spies could escape and get back to Joshua. Well, when they got back to Joshua, they told him what had happened, and Joshua thought, how on earth really are we going to get into this really big, strong city? But like I said, Joshua was wise. So what he did, he went to pray. He knows that the best thing to do, and we don't know what to do, is to go and ask God. Okay? And God told him to do something that, frankly, I think sounds a bit weird. Okay? But quite honestly, I think what we find is as we go through life, if we listen to God, sometimes he will ask us to do weird things, but because he's God, he can do anything through those situations. So this is what he told him to do. Joshua, the next day, got all the army together, and the army had a great band as well with loads of horns and things, and he took them all the soldiers, up to the city walls. Okay? He took them all the way up. We'll stick some heads on them, because I think we'll find, wherever we go in the world, if people are alive and kicking, whatever else might be wrong with them, they'll all have heads. Okay? We'll put some arms in there as well. And he took the army up. How do you know what he did? He walked them all the way round the city. They just marched very quietly round the city. And then when they'd been round once, they stopped. And do you know what they did? They went back to their tents. Well, the guards on the top were just a bit confused. They were expecting an invasion, and all they did was walk round and go back. Well, the second day, they came up to the city walls, and they walked around once, and then they went back. And they did this the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day. Well, the guards on the top were starting to chuckle at themselves now, because on the seventh day, they came up, they marched around the walls, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 7 times in total. And the guards were just laughing. They said, you think you're some great army? How are you going to invade us? All you're doing is getting dizzy. But then when they'd been around 7 times, Joshua gave a signal, and everybody in the band got their horn, and blew. There was this huge noise. Yeah, that's right. And everybody else who didn't have a horn or whatever, they made a right old racket. And do you know what? Those strong walls of Jericho, they started to shake. And the walls of Jericho started to crack. And the walls of Jericho came right down to the ground. And what it did was the walls fell. They fell outwards, which made like a kind of ramp. And because of this ramp, the Israelite army was able to go in, and they destroyed everything except there was one bit of the wall that didn't fall down. It was that bit. It's right, it's where Rahab lived. And you know, today archaeologists, we were kind of like scientists who dig things up from the ground, they found the site of Jericho, and they've confirmed that just like the Bible says, the walls fell out, and that there was one section of the walls that actually, I don't know how they figured these things out, but there's one bit that didn't fall down. So it's actually true as to what the Bible says. But you know, after this, they went and they got Rahab out of the house. And you know what? Rahab, she stopped being nasty. In fact, what she did, because she was saved, she went and lived among the Israelite people. You see, God did this. I'll get this quickly. God provided a way of escape for Rahab. You see, it wasn't just the red rope. The red rope didn't actually save her. The red rope was just a sign. Okay, but what saved her was the fact that she realized she was wrong. She realized that there's no way she was stronger than God. And the fact that she had to give herself over to God. And that's why she hid God's people, the spies. And that is what saved her. You know, the Bible tells us, actually, that she was such a person that when we read the history of Jesus' family, Rahab's there. So she became one of the ancestors of Jesus. What a privilege. What a privilege. But you know, not only did she get saved there, but actually something greater than that happened. Because over 1,000 years later, God came into the world. We talked about it earlier. I heard it being talked about. God came into the world in the form of Jesus, his son. And what he did is he came with one express purpose, which was to go to that cross that we remember at Easter. And when he did that, remember I said we all tell lies and we all do things that are wrong, because none of us are perfect. Well, Jesus went there to pay the punishment for that, because he never did anything wrong. But when he did that, he broke through that barrier and made a pathway for us to get to know God the Father, for us to get back to God and have a relationship with him. You see, that is the Christian message. Without that, and the fact that Jesus was raised from the dead 3 days later and is alive today, without that, the Christian message is worthless. It's all about Jesus. And okay, Rahab couldn't have had that privilege because Jesus hadn't come to that point. But what she did was exactly what we need to do today. We need to say he's sorry, we need to acknowledge that God is king and that he's sovereign, and that actually it's only through him that we can be saved. You know, I said at the beginning that Rahab was one of my favorite people in the Bible. Why? She didn't lead an army. She wasn't a David. She wasn't a Saul. I'll tell you why. Because Rahab is a perfect example of somebody who's right on the fringes of society. Rahab is a perfect example of an outsider. Rahab wasn't even of God's people. She was the lowest of the low. The fact, I don't know if you know this, folks, the fact that she lived in the city walls said as much. What would have happened was that the important people, the dignitaries, would have lived near the city centre, and as you got further out, people were allowed to live in certain areas. So if you're on the very edge of the city, as in the walls, you're on the fringes of society. We have a lot of people today that see themselves on the fringes of society, that behave in a Rahab kind of way through aggression and frustration, because they're frustrated with themselves And because they think they're worthless, so why should they make the effort? And what we get with Rahab is someone who God shows mercy on. With Rahab, we get someone who accepts that she's not good enough. She knows she can't defeat God, but she wants that mercy. And somebody who allows God to work and do great things through her. That's one of the reasons why I love the character, the person of Rahab. To be able to be that low and allow God to work in you. That God should seek to work in someone like that. Far too often we come across people who, and we meet them sometimes when we're preaching on the streets, who think that Christianity is for nice middle class people. And we need to get that message over to them. That actually Jesus is there for everyone. Part of the biggest problem, of course, is getting people to admit that they're wrong in the first place. Because people have a huge sense of pride, particularly in today's culture where we're told that you can get a self-help manual and do everything yourself. But there's so many people that are on the edges of society who are crying out to be brought into God's family, crying out for a sense of belonging. And as we go forward into the week, who are we going to meet? Who are we going to meet in our workplaces, in our social settings? Let's mix with people. It doesn't necessarily mean become like them, but mix with them. Help them to realize the church, Christianity, is not a holy huddle and is not a clique. Let's take that gospel to them. I don't mean, Bible bash them. But first of all, get to know them, give them a sense of worth. Let's show Jesus in a practical way so that they trust us, so that then at the right appointed Spirit-led time, we can open the Word of God to them. Just something to think about as we go through into this week. Try to get something on the end of this for the adults as well as the kids. Although the adults answer most of the questions, but thank you for listening. So Father, we just thank you. And thank you for this fellowship here in Newport, in Crindau. Lord, I just thank you that you have your hand on this fellowship. You have your hand on these people. Lord, as we go into this week, Lord, whatever age we are, we just ask that we will draw alongside people, Lord, and we will help people to realize that whatever their situation in life, Lord, you have a place for each and every one of us. You don't want to condemn, Lord, you want to save. The ball's in our court. Father, you are a loving God who wants to forgive, who wants to bring people into your family. We thank you that you save so many of us, Lord. And we just ask you to guide us as we go forward. In Jesus' name, amen.